Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of TPM Today. A very special episode of TPM Today. I'm actually headed to TPM right now. This is the first time I've ever done this show from the airport before. I've done the show in a lot of different places, but I'm actually at Dulles awaiting my flight out to LA. I'm super excited to meet everyone and see everyone at TPM starting on Sunday morning. Actually, the parties start on Friday now, so it like literally it's like a week-long event at this point. But in any case, super excited. I won't spend a ton of time on TPM. If you haven't registered, you can still come. There's still time to register. Just go to tpm.com/register and join the party. I will say really quickly, a couple other events to mention that the Journal of Commerce puts on. Oh, by the way, I'm Eric Johnson. I'm the host of our show every 2 weeks, second and fourth Friday of every month. I'm senior technology editor of the Journal of Commerce. I got so excited about being in an airport that I forgot to say who I was. But when I'm not writing for the Journal of Commerce, I'm doing this show, which is my favorite thing to do each month. So I have a great guest today who is going to be joining me on a panel at TPM. And I can't wait to talk to him. We've known him for a long time, so it'll be fun to have a discussion with all of you today. Really quickly, a couple other shows to mention that are coming up. Break Bulk and Project Cargo, the Journal of Commerce Break Bulk and Project Cargo conference comes hot on the heels of TPM. It's I believe April 20th and 21st 19th through 21st in New Orleans. Geez, I'm all over the place right now. In New Orleans, you are going to want to be there if you are a part of the Break Bulk and Project Cargo community. It is the most important gathering. Stuff gets done. I'll be talking tech. It's a lot of fun. Join us there as well. And then I should also mention that at the beginning of April, and I'll be talking about this through March as well, we're going to be launching registration for our Inland Distribution Conference in Chicago, September 28th through 30th. Obviously, that one is near and dear to my heart, so I'm going to tell you all about that throughout the second half of the year. But just to put that on your radar. Cool. All right. News of the week. Man, this has been a newsy week. Before I even get to the Supreme Court and IEEPA tariffs, I should mention, as my guest mentioned before we went live, there was another event that I didn't even get to put a story to, but we obviously covered at jfc.com. Hapag-Lloyd is buying Zim, which is a major deal. In any other week, that's the biggest story of the week, month, quarter, year, potentially, right? More consolidation in the container shipping industry. But because there's a ton of other stuff going on, I didn't even mention that in News of the Week. So what I have here is the story about, which I think everybody knows about at this point. Supreme Court ruled against the administration on so-called IEEPA tariffs, said that was an improper application of that act. And so now we move to the next phase, which is figuring out how all the importers that paid something on the order of $175 billion of tariffs might get refunds on that. I did another story later in the week talking about like tools that some tech providers and forwarders are using or have built to help importers get that money back. It's very confusing. I think there's some movement. Actually, tomorrow, the federal government has to answer to a court called the Court of International Trade, where a bunch of importers have sued to expedite the refund process. And so the DOJ has to answer to those to the court about what its response will be to the lawsuit. So that's going to get expedited. We're going to talk all about this at TPM. I have a session with Pete Mento, the famous Pete Mento, on Wednesday, talking about this refund process and what that all entails. All right, next story. This also would be the biggest story of any week or month in a normal circumstance, but it's just another story today. WiseTech Global, I'm interviewing their CEO. My guest today is going to be on the panel during that session. He's on the same session with WiseTech's CEO, which we'll talk about. WiseTech on Wednesday announced as part of their financial earnings that they were laying off a huge number of their staff, and primarily due to the impact of AI on their business, both from a product development piece to a customer service piece to code generation, all sorts of things, right? Things that we've talked about a lot on this show. So very interesting. The question is whether this is a situation of they just had too many people, or whether AI is actually transforming the nature of how businesses are structured and the size of their workforce. If it's the latter, obviously this is maybe the start of a very hugely influential kind of era. So we're going to be talking about AI up and down the program at TPM. You're going to be tired of hearing about it, but it's obviously vitally important. So I'm also excited to talk about that with my guest this week, who's Ian Arroyo, who's the Chief Strategy Officer at a company called Freightos, which you're probably familiar with at this point. They've been around for a while. Ian, awesome to have you on, especially 2 days before we start TPM.
Thanks, Eric. It's going to be a super fun, I think, panel on Monday with Zubin from WiseTech, and just excited to hear what's going on in the industry outside of the headlines.
It will be very interesting, that's for sure. Fun, exciting, entertaining. Who knows? It will be no question. It will be interesting. But yeah, I'm excited to have you on it as well. Like I feel like I don't want everybody else to get overshadowed because of WiseTech's news. But so before we get into Freightos, just really briefly, can you give people some background on what you did prior to joining Freightos?
Sure. So I've been at Freightos for about 7 years now, and really got my start in logistics and supply chain about 16 years ago. I was in government and defense tech, where we were moving non-standard equipment downrange to different theaters for special operators. So did that for the better part of 7 years, and during that time frame, got an MBA and taught at the master's program at the B School at the University of Florida, Professional Sales and Communication. Worked in travel tech for a couple of years, and then jumped into Freightos to really kind of accelerate the digitization kind of process that the industry was beginning to really go through. So it's been an incredible ride. Got to go through COVID at Freightos, and it was part of bringing digital air cargo to bear with the company, and we took it public 3 years ago. So it's been quite the ride, and it's been neat to see kind of the evolution of log tech kind of lay on top of a very similar map as travel tech back in the early 2000s. So super fun.
I was going to say it. First of all, I'm watching ground handling literally happen outside the window where I'm sitting right now. So very meta going on right now. Yeah. Your travel tech background is interesting because I can remember early on Freightos' founder, Zvi Schreiber, trying to liken what could happen in the freight industry to what has already happened in the travel industry. So that makes total sense that you had some of that background before joining the company. Give people, as I said, I'm pretty sure people are pretty familiar with Freightos at this point, but for those who are not, give people a lay of the land of what you all do, products, who you serve, who your customer base is, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Freightos, our goal is really to be the digital backbone for global freight. So we don't just focus on one rung of the industry's value chain. So we work with the carrier community, that's ocean, air, truck, the forwarder community, about 4,000 freight forwarders globally today that we work with, and over 10,000 importers and exporters from SMB to some of the most well-known household names around the globe. On the carrier side, we do quite a few things. I think probably what a lot of this audience is familiar with is the air marketplace, where over 70 global airlines, probably about 80% of global capacity represented, are digitally distributing rates and capacity to forwarders globally. Forwarders are rating and booking and quoting off of that. In the forwarder space, rate management, quotation management, booking management, market intelligence and execution, procurement also. And then on the shipper side, we run a marketplace, which a lot of people are aware of on the SMB side. So we're still doing that today. So it's the largest SMB marketplace for B2B logistics. But on the enterprise space, we do procurement, so tender management, procurement, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. And then that flows into kind of operational excellence and execution, so rating, booking, shipment management, freight audit pay, that kind of stuff, into market intelligence, which kind of feeds the entire thing back into procurement, right? So you're using actionable intelligence, not only your own, but also whatever's going on in the market. So again, Freightos just looks to really support the entirety of the industry's value chain to move from offline to online.
Yeah, very interesting. So let's just quickly address. There's been a bit of
Sure.
change at the top of the company over the last few months. Zvi,
Yep.
who I just referenced, was the longtime CEO, founder. Stepped back from that to join the board, and then most recently just was announced that he's leaving the board as well. What does that mean from in terms of like how should the market interpret that from like a direction of company product kind of perspective?
Sure. So first of all, Zvi is an incredible founder, serial founder. As you know, I would imagine many people who are listening in know. I think Freightos is his fifth company, and he's very excited. You know, his background is AI. That's what his education is in, actually. So
Yep.
he's very excited about what's going on
Is
in
that
that space
popular
as
these
well.
days?
A
Yeah.
little bit. I mean, I hear it every once in a while,
Yeah.
especially at Manifest. But yeah, he and the board have been having conversations for quite some period of time around kind of where the organization was in its life cycle, and
Yep.
kind of what he's excited about doing next. So he's already looking at his next thing and doing his next thing in that space, which is cool. We're excited for him. I think directionally, for the business, one thing that Svi did incredibly well and will always do incredibly well is empower his executive teams with a lot of vision and freedom to go execute. So the executive team at Freightos is very strong. Our vision is his vision. We are absolutely, doubling down on our focus, as we said in our earnings call this week, in regards to really going to a deeper level, even with our solutions for forwarders and BCOs. Really, just making sure that's operationally excellent at every level. And we announced, expansion of our global air product into ocean, which is something our clients have been asking for a long time. And then, doubling down on some of the execution tools for the BCOs as well. So, it's in no way, shape, or form are we looking to, change the organization's vision. I think what we're looking at now is how do we execute and scale. And that's, a big part of being a public company is just making sure that, you're scaling forecastably and, where you're headed and, can be very clear about it. So from that perspective, I would say that we're continuing to provide the very best customer service and products to our clients across the carrier forwarder and BCO community.
Yep. Yeah, thanks for that. I think Zvi deserves a lot of credit as a bunch of early
Yeah,
founders into this
really
space
does.
do, in terms of not just what was built, but in terms of like being a good messenger of what the industry could move toward, right? He was always extremely eloquent on that kind of side of things in a way that some other founders that were doing great things maybe weren't as good at. So he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, and the
And
staying
and
power,
definitely,
right? He drove
yeah,
staying power in the logistics tech space before it was popular, and I think that there's a lot of
15 years,
kudos to him.
going on
Yeah,
15 years now, right? This is not
absolutely.
a, yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I don't want this to be all about that because we have lots to discuss, including our
Sure.
session next week. So, um, this session that I put together, which I think is going to has morphed into like this. I don't know how we're going to talk about all we're going to talk about in 40 minutes, but um, the idea behind it was okay, there's all of this stuff going on in the background in terms of like tools that assist programmers and software companies and even idiots like me who don't even know what code looks like, much
Are you
less
vibe coding, Eric?
I'm vibe prompting, I would say. So
Okay.
yeah. But I mean, we had a discussion about this, about like how that was impacting. You guys are providing software to enterprises, large and small.
Sure.
It has to be accountable. It can't be like a fun project that maybe works sometimes and doesn't other times, or has limited scope. So we talked about like how incorporate some of that stuff into what you're doing at an enterprise level, and that's kind of the gist of this story. In the meantime, as we talked about in the news, at the top of the show, WiseTech's laid off 30% of its staff on the premise that a lot of stuff can be done by AI now internally,
Mhm.
not just like uh, you know handing tools to the customer. So like how are you sort of like making sense of this crazy fast kind of progression that we're seeing right now?
Look, I think it's one of the things that's very interesting is just the speed at which it's changing on a week to week basis. You know what I mean? So like even things that you think are kind of set last week are probably going to change this week, and very likely to change the week following.
Yeah.
Um, it, where Freightos is looking at it, let's say internally, right, and really applying it internally is there's great opportunity to automate lots of areas where previously it was very difficult to automate, right? So from that perspective, it gives us an opportunity to really double down on putting our best people on the hardest problems alongside of AI, and then let AI do the stuff that you know isn't necessarily super value add, right? And I think that,
Mm.
as we're going into this conversation next week, one of the big questions is going to be, okay, well, what should we be building internally versus continuing to pay somebody else for or rent, right? And I think one of the biggest kind of disruptors that folks are looking at is what is our competitive advantage as a carrier, as a forwarder, as a shipper? What do we do uniquely that somebody else doesn't do? And so one of the premises, of things that we're talking about with clients across the industry, right, not just one segment of, is, what are the things that you know how to do and that your business does better than anybody else does? And, shouldn't you consider applying AI to that and not necessarily trying to become a TMS provider or a visibility provider, or working to suddenly integrate 100 different carriers on your own,
Mm.
because those are the things that aren't necessarily, let's say, unique, right? But the things that are unique, that are under your hood, that you don't want anybody else to see, those are the things you should be doubling down on, tripling down on, and sicking AI on, because those are the things that are going to help you level up as the AI revolution continues in this space.
It's a great framework to think about it. I mean, you're right. It's so I've sort of like taken the stance of like things are moving so quickly that I'm not even sure how anybody like invests heavily into anything right now. It's really about like
Mhm.
just being. I think I've described it as being like informationally proactive, but like maybe investment, a
Yeah,
bit reactive because you wouldn't want to commit a huge amount of money to a model that may like be completely out of date in 3 weeks, literally
yeah,
that fast now. So,
yeah,
um, and you're able to keep options open. I've talked to companies that are using, you know, Claude for something, and they're using Gemini for something, and it's a mix, and you're not necessarily having to commit in the same way that you would commit to like a SaaS provider to handle a
yeah,
specific function at your company. So um, very interesting. Well, again, we could talk about this for the entire 30 minutes,
all
but
day.
I originally I wanted to have you on, especially ahead of TPM, because TPM at its heart is a procurement focused conference, right? It's about
Sure.
getting people who need space on vessels and airplanes and trucks together with the providers that have that space or resell that space. So you're really kind of at the forefront of procurement now, especially after the acquisition you made a couple of years ago that gave you like pretty enterprise level tools on that side of things. What are you seeing from a procurement perspective? Like, and let's maybe start with ocean, since that's the thrust of
Sure.
TPM. The Trans-Pacific, and even to a lesser extent Asia Europe, are sort of built on these long-term, often annual contracts that you spend a lot of time negotiating. People fly to LA, Long Beach, and they sit in rooms for countless hours, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they negotiate these contracts. So what are you seeing in terms of like how that's shifting at all, and how is tech sort of playing a role, if at all?
Yeah. Some of our clients are actually going to be in Long Beach this week doing exactly that. So we're, pretty familiar with it. Um, you know, in your teaser, right, it said, is the annual contract dead? Or maybe the annual contract is dead. I think it's to start off. I don't think the annual contract is going anywhere, to be honest, because now it's just that the substance of the annual contract has changed. The annual contract is now about locking in the right SOPs, the right, master sellers agreement or services agreement with your logistics service providers, making sure that you're covered from, legality perspective and risk perspective and all of those kinds of things. What is changing in the annual contract is whether or not it's a fixed price for the year
Mm.
and what the mechanism is for adjusting volume commitments and rate commitments. That has changed and I think continue to change and evolve. We're hearing it, we're seeing it every day that we're talking to forwarders, shippers, and also the carriers. Albeit I'd say that the carriers are a little less public about it. So what's really changing, what we're really seeing is the negotiation. I'm not negotiating my network from the people or the companies or providers that I want in my network. I am adjusting how often my rates get updated, how they get updated, why they get updated, what's the trigger mechanism for that, whether or not I have firm volume commitments through the year or only firm volume commitments for a certain period of time. So that at any given time, right, if the administration tweets or the Red Sea closes or something else happens geopolitically or God forbid COVID 2.0 happens, right, I can adjust my network in real time to ensure that I can meet my commitments, from a demand perspective. So I would say that what technology is doing in this case is the flow of data. Like if think back to 2019 when you and I first started chatting. 2019, Freightos was trying to get the Freightos Baltic Index, the FBX, off the ground, right?
Yep.
We had been kind of publishing it for a couple of years, not officially. And during that time frame, right, everybody's question, first of all, nobody used market intelligence like that. And it was this thing of like, well, how old are your rates anyways, right? Like if they're 3 months old, how am I supposed to even think about using that? And so now I think what's happened with COVID as a catalyst, right, is that data became through the visibility craze and et cetera, data became the number one kind of driver of, whether you were providing value. And that data needed to be high resolution, highly accurate, and very, very fresh, right? And so if it wasn't fresh, but it was, high resolution and highly accurate, it still left a value gap. And so today, I think what you're seeing is, Freightos and other players in the space have gotten to a place where data is real time or near real time. So like for Freightos Air Index, the Freightos Air Index is calculated on an hourly basis because that's how many transactions are coming through the platform on an everyday basis, right? And so that's how fresh the data can be on the air side and daily on the ocean side. And so no longer are we in the space of, okay, well, the data was, 2 weeks old, 3 weeks old. Now, when somebody tweets something about, a tariff in place X, I, as a BCO, and then my forwarder, logistics service provider that I'm working with, have the ability to very quickly say, okay, in real time, I need to adjust my network so that I can shift production out of, East Asia to Brazil, and we're going to change volume commitments from East Asia to Brazil because it's my total cost of ownership coming out of Brazil is better for the next 3 months until we figure out what's going to happen with this tariff specifically. And so that flexibility is really been brought to bear, I think, because of how just high resolution and accurate and fresh the data is to both the carriers, the forwarders, and the shippers.
There's a lot to unpack there. I don't disagree with you. I think the volume of index data that now exists, that people used to have to go out into the market and just do their own research to put it in modern terms. I mean, they still do that, right? Everyone still does price checks with your service providers, but you have another sort of like guardrail around how to measure that, and you have it much more real time. So that obviously is going to impact how companies think about adapting their existing contracts or going to the spot market or going back to their providers and saying, hey, can we align this a little bit better? Last time we talked was 9 months ago, right? Like, does it make sense? Just so at the same time, if we think about transportation cost is a component of like the cost of a good, right? And
Right.
historically, the value of locking down a long-term rate was that you have to sell your product to another party. You need to know, and that price doesn't change over the course of that contract. So you need a little bit of like consistency on the transportation side. So we also have to bear in mind like the range of rates, right? Like we are not in a position during the pandemic where rates were 10x what they normally are, right? We're back to sort of a normal, what I like is normal historical band. So how does that impact? It's not really a question, just a comment. But do you think, I mean, it's my perception that the indexes in the market have sort of crossed over into this space of being like actionable rather than just sort of monitoring kind of. Is that,
Sure.
I mean, you guys are, provide among the, best known index rate data. Is that your sort of sense too?
I think so. I think we've gotten to the place where the value chain in the industry, carriers, forwarders, shippers, trust the data now, right? Not just ours, but some other providers that are out there as well. And the piece that kind of proves that out, and going back to your previous point, right, is McDonald's hedges soybeans for the price of their chicken nuggets, right? Like that's how they fix the price annually for their chicken nuggets. And so this is no different. Now you have tradable, futures on FBX.
Yep.
Others are saying that they're going to be providing something similar in the near future. And we are aware that some shippers, forwarders, and carriers are using hedging against index-linked contracts to set their max and min, so that their CFOs would know, just like a CFO at McDonald's or somewhere else, right? That here's my max, here's my min. I can be very clear that this is where I'm going to be for the year and set my pricing, and I don't have to worry about it. So I think it's really become actionable because the data is reliable, and enough folks around the industry plus the finance industry have said this is now reliable, right? The finance industry piece is also important because the regulators have said this is, this works, right? This is true, this is accurate, this works. FBX is being used by the trade court that you were speaking of earlier to set kind of pricing in different types of court cases. So it's very interesting to see, right, like the different steps that have had to happen across multiple industries to get to a place where now as a logistics industry we can say this is good enough for us to use like we do in FX or like we do in hedging oil or fuel or whatever else.
Pork bellies and all those
exactly.
Have long used these mechanisms. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say we've been waiting a long time for. There's been multiple generations of this kind of discussion, and like with everything else in international freight and trade, it just takes a long time. Nothing happens really overnight. Unlike the AI coding developments, which hey, maybe that's the thing that like kickstarts a little bit faster sort of adoption cycles for some of these things. But yeah, when I look back at TPM, I sort of sometimes go, like, what was a new concept that came out during this event? That's something for me that I try to benchmark against year to year, is because a lot of times you can go a whole year and we're talking about like what's happening right now, but there's not really like some sort of like really disruptive idea that will better the industry. So we're out of time and I have a flight to catch. I have to ask, this is the last question I ask of every guest: who's your favorite band musician? And you have to say why.
Okay. So I had to think about this deeply over the last couple of days.
This is always the hardest question.
It's by far the hardest question. I even sat down with my wife and tried to like chart it out. So I'm going to give you my current favorite musician.
Okay.
Not like of all time, is John Batiste, if you're familiar with John Batiste. So I was a classically trained violinist and singer for the better part of like 22 years.
Of course. Yeah.
And
why not?
And logistics, And my sister is also, she's a concert violinist, and I just love what he's doing. He's like the, the Mozart or the Bach or the Beethoven of this era. And what he's doing with music is just incredible and incredibly moving. And his story, his wife's story, it's just incredible to me. So right now it's currently John Batiste.
Cool. Very cool. That's a good one to add to the TPM Today playlist. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
What's the best way for people to get in touch with you other than meeting you at TPM?
Yeah, come see us at TPM. My email is Ian, IAN, at Freightos, FREIGHTOS.com. Super simple, super easy. Feel free to shoot me a note. Would love to chat at Freightos or at
You're
TPM.
active on LinkedIn as well. And yeah,
yes, I am
in the
on
app,
LinkedIn as well.
Look him up in the TPM app if you're in Long Beach this week, and I'm sure he'd be delighted to have a chat. Thanks, Ian. See you very soon.
Thanks, Eric.
Safe
travels, brother.
See you soon. Yep. All right, really quickly, because I'm already over. Dad joke of the week time. This is appropriate joke as I head to a conference where I'm probably going to eat too much. I was going to start a diet, and this is actually true, I have a lot on my plate right now. It's actually true. I have 11 sessions to manage at TPM, so I'm excited about it, but it's a lot on my plate right now. Thank you to Ian. Awesome discussion. Definitely seek him out at TPM and definitely email him if you want to hear more about what they're doing. Look forward to seeing everyone in Long Beach very soon. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will be back in 2 weeks to have a post TPM episode and tell you everything cool that happened at Long Beach. Have a great week.